Without further ado, let's get started. So we've already done a quick intro, but I am joined today by Gary, who is our founder. I don't know if any of you have met him before, but thanks for joining, Gary.
It's all right. You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. You couldn't get another guest, could you, Stella?
For this particular one, it was best that we shared some of our expertise, and I'm going to actually explain why. So thanks. Nice link in. For those of you who don't know, Gary and I haven't just been working in tech. Before that, we were both agency side and did do some in-house work as well, both in public relations and digital marketing, and that is how Coverage Book was born. And we brought a lot of our experience, learnings into the tool, and some of that will come through. But equally, it's not just about our experience that we wanted to share about cross sort of PR and digital marketing reporting and getting results in the best shape possible for sharing around organizations. We also talk to you guys a lot, and that actually is a lot of people in PR who are all creating reports. You can see at the top there that it's just, I need to stop looking at the comments now, but it's nice to see that you're all getting involved. But yes, you can see at the top there that there's actually 11,000 active users of Coverage Book based around the world. You can see here from some of you who have joined us on the webinar today that you are based in all sorts of different countries, all creating different reports for different types of people. And that is what we're going to dig into a little bit today. It is a real mixture of agency and in-house and who we're creating reports for. We have our we're going to explore who our primary audiences are for our PR reports and how we could potentially get those reports and our results spread further to make our results seen by more people, which in turn is going to not make you guys famous, but hopefully share the value of PR further across organizations. In addition to some of the insight that we get from you guys and from real report readers, which is absolute gold dust, I know, especially when I was creating reports, we just really wanted to know the true opinions and feelings of some of those, like the board reading our reports. It's quite hard to find that out, but we're going to be sharing some of that insight with you. But as well as that, we've also worked with some real amazing experts in data visualization and data storytelling and I actually did a really amazing podcast with Cole, who's from Storytelling with Data, a great title for an amazing organization. And Cole has actually sent us some worksheets and some tips for this webinar as well. So I'll share that too. So yeah, with all of that insight, we are going to cover with you guys today the truth about some PR report and also how to get to know your audience, who you are sending those reports to, how to adapt the story that you're trying to tell, not just sell, with your results, and how to just get them across the organization more. So we hear this is probably, Gary, do you think this is probably in our top 5 requests for features is, can we get a gauge on who actually opens my report? That comes through quite a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And there are many ways in which you can get that question answered, actually. I don't know how many. So there's nothing really inbuilt into Coverage Book yet. Still not 100% sure if we ever will, but there are certainly lots of ways that you can get a hint on that. So we've got teams that use tools like Bitly, like link shorteners. So they generate links for their online reports through things like Bitly, so they can get a steer on whether or not their reports are being read. My favorite innovation of all of those kinds of tools is just to go and ask. I think it's probably my hint from 20 years of doing this sort of stuff is just to go and ask. I mean, I said you sort of reminded me of some of our agency days. I have to say, I think when I was younger in the agency, I wasn't really thinking about who the end report reader was. I was so geeky around some of the dashboards that we were making and about the process of it. I actually didn't really stop to think about whether or not anybody was reading it or valued that information. That was certainly my experience from the agency side. So it almost took coming out of the agency to look back and start asking that question.
Yeah. It's something that people don't want to admit, but everyone has felt at some point and asked themselves if they haven't even had the courage to ask other people. So yeah, we're going to try and instill some confidence in that. Also, we have been asked, this is my report read, by the whole distribution list. And this was interesting. This was actually from a big sports organization in the US, and their global PR teams use Coverage Book, create their reports in Coverage Book. And the report creator that I was speaking to had a list of over 250 recipients on her distribution list for her report, her monthly report. We asked, who's on that distribution list? Who are they? Are they the board? Are they other PR teams? She wasn't sure, but they all had the same email address. So that's like a really interesting one. I don't think that that's unusual either. I know that when I was doing daily snippets tasks when I was first starting out in PR, I was given an email list. I was just hitting send, and I didn't really adapt the information in there. So you guys might be sort of changing from that, but this is what we're going to get into because it's so important. It doesn't just start with the creating of the report, it goes all the way through. So to answer the question, is my PR report being read? Yes, but only when it has the right delivery, context and personalization to the audience. So we're going to show you a little bit more about that. So let's define report audience, because this is what I'm going to be talking about quite a lot. So audience is really what it is. So it could be people in a meeting. It could be you guys on this webinar. That could be your weekly Zoom status update on a Friday. It could be email recipients to daily clips, to monthly reports, to a quarterly report that you're sending out. It could also be the people who are receiving PR results on a forward. So it might not even be your immediate audience that you know about, but the forwards who are also receiving PR results and maybe clips. Really, really important to be thinking about these guys. And there's an arrow to say why they are important. But I'm gonna come back to them as well, because
I'm constantly amazed by your presentation skills, Stella. It's amazing.
So yeah, they are important recipients too, and so we are going to return to them. So I said about grouping. So this is something that is a really important task when you're thinking about your different audiences. So I would say to even split them, your different audience format. We're going to be talking a lot today about email recipients, because we know that often that's like the most used format when we're in Coverage Book. So people taking the shareable link and then sending it to people who they might have on their list. But even whatever group you're thinking about, it's important to do the different groupings. So here we've got primary, secondary, and then the forward ons. And then they might be, the primary is could be your main client, and often the person who has requested a report. Secondary could be stakeholders, so that could be an SEO team, it could be the head of marketing, so people who are aware, they're aware of your work. And then the additional stakeholders are the people beyond who you may not know, but PR does affect their job. And we're going to sort of delve into some of the stories that we've found out about where it's really important for you to try and understand these different groups and how you can adapt. So I'm going to dive straight into one of those. This is a guy called Jack. He's actually my brother, and he makes TV shows. You might think, why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant because he, going to jump quickly here. Oops. He made this show. Not sure if any of you watched it. Let me know if you did. It was available on Amazon in the US, and it was also in the UK as well. So he was very proud of this show. And at around of the time of launch in the UK and in the US, he was very keen to see how it's being received, so the reviews of the show. So he wasn't in touch with the PR team, but he was keen to see to this coverage. So he would get the clips forwarded to him on an email, and I'll show you what that looks like shortly. And then in terms of metrics, that are literally attachments of the screen grabs, and in terms of metrics, it was readership of those sites and those publications, and that's what he was receiving. Now, he actually said to me, being his sister, one day, he was like, press is so important because it's a way that I can gauge if my show is going to get a second season or not. I was like, wow, that's really important reason to know how well that PR is doing. Yet the PR team wasn't sending the coverage direct to him as a producer. He was one of the forwards on. So this is what he was receiving. So these were some of the clips that were attached to his email. Some of the screen grabs didn't even work. They were broken. This wasn't coverage book, by the way. This was just an email that they had sent, with the summary of coverage through to Jack. But he was really important to him to see that. So this is how it flowed. So there was the PR teams that were working on behalf of Amazon and Channel 4, generating the coverage. They were their primary report audience, and the person who requested the report was the Channel 4 head of marketing. So that's why they were sending it in that format. That's how they were sending it. Then this person then hit forward onto the commissioner and then onto other people. And yet there's this really important decision being made here as to whether there's going to be another season or not. But it gives you an idea of this PR team was just thinking about these guys. They weren't really thinking about the secondary audience, which is the senior commissioner, or they definitely weren't thinking about Jack. Yet that was a really important person who has forwarded on the information and the coverage. So it's just wanted to get you to start to think about the audience that you are sending reports to. Who are they? Who's your primary audience of reports right now? Who do they send on to? And then who are the third group? Are there people there that are really important there? And then what do they want? Because it does all change. When we think about the person that we know has requested the report, we often really know what their fears are, what their objectives are, what they're trying to achieve, what will make them take action so moving on to an example of a primary report request, I want to introduce you to somebody else. Some of you, if you've joined the past webinars, you might actually recognize James. He is a long-term user of Coverage Book and has given us loads of feedback in the way that he uses the tool, which has all fed into some of the changes into actually, which he does from all of you guys. But this was an interesting one. So I want you to really think about that sort of primary audience. And this is how his PR team really got to know what he needed and why that made a big difference. So a while ago now, this is probably a few years ago, James was, so he's, for those of you who don't know him, James is, his title is the Global Head of Culture and Entertainment at Diageo. Diageo is a global drinks organization. So Smirnoff, Guinness, Gordon's Gin, etc., all of the brands within Diageo. James heads up the global marketing budget and works with the brand managers to distribute the marketing budget and then analyzes all of those results. So really important job, especially for those agencies that are working within those brands in a different market. Now, James was originally receiving the PR agency report. They were different formats because they were different agencies. They were for different brands. They had different PR managers. But he then got in touch with the PR teams and requested a different format of PR results. So before, he was just getting the full screen shots and readership and reach. For some people, that might have been great. That might be exactly what they need. But for James, it was really hard for him to do his job because his objective was quite specific. Now,
I think that's quite interesting, that point on getting the different formats and just the habits that you can fall into, especially in, from my experience in agency world. Used to be like, we're working with this brand, you must use this type form to work with this brand, and you'd almost spend ages like manually looking for the right type type fonts and things like that, and changing all these things that ultimately, you know, you might have spent hours doing that, more so than actually gathering the data itself, just to find, if you really ask somebody like James, what do you need? And it'd be like, I don't need any of that, actually. I just need you to be doing this particular thing. I'm not saying that's always the case, but it's sort of a case in point of like, wow, maybe no one just stopped to ask. They just sort of expected to, well, we just do reports in this way. This is how we've always done it. And we do it this way for everybody. They could have actually saved themselves a lot of time and effort. So yeah, that's quite interesting when you speak to James.
Yeah, I mean, there's the plain conversation of what do you need in terms of a report. But if it is your direct client, and especially with agencies and their direct client, you do start to build up really great rapport, especially if you've been working with them for a long time. You do start to really get to know them. This is really important to bring into reporting. Like, any of you in agencies will know that when you get to know a client really, really well, you get to know what motivates them. You get to know what scares them when they are reporting themselves internally, or, you know, what is in danger to their role and what could be an opportunity to their role as well. All of these things, as you get to know this is the great opportunity that you guys have with knowing that your primary report audience, bring in all of that insight into the way that you send your results back. So yeah, going back to James, he actually said, once he was asked, reach actually is a big gripe of his because it doesn't give him what he needs, because he is trying to do a really specific job of this, which we were really surprised when he showed us what he was actually doing with the data. So first of all, he asked his teams to stop sending him screenshots, which was a big thing for many of us in PR. Like, what? No screenshots? He just wanted the estimated views data for all of the coverage from all of his PR agencies. So those of you who are Coverage Book customers and users, you will know, be familiar with this as a metric. We're going to show you a little bit more about it shortly, but it is what it says on the tin. It estimates the views of the clips, whether that's online media or social posts. James just wanted that for all of the coverage across all of the brands and all of the agencies. So he was doing this. So he needed to, so earned is all of PR, and this is all of his agency's results. And then he was also comparing those results to his digital teams and his social teams who were working on owned content. And the key metric here that he was working across all of them was impressions. So again, with any of his online advertising, social advertising teams, he was asking for, don't get me wrong, he was getting, all of the reports with lots of metrics, but he needed consistency across all of the lines of marketing to have some kind of comparable metric so he could make better decisions. And he was using impressions from the other areas and then estimated views as like a proxy for impressions to do this sort of big analysis at the end of the year. So going back to the metric that he was using, that this is how it works in Coverage Book. And I think actually, Gary, it's probably a good time for us to just quickly go into Coverage Book so people can see how he was getting to this metric, because what he ended up doing, I'm going to just pause. So what James ended up doing was asking, he created one account, and then he asked all of his PR agencies and teams to drop in their coverage, and then he was doing two things. I
guess this is a sort of an example of a typical sort of standard Coverage Book report with a default kind of layout. Well, actually, that's not a default. Let's go into roundups. So this is kind of typically how coverage is presented. And it's kind of this that he wasn't super keen on seeing, certainly for the volume of coverage that they get. So this started, this led to us anyway to start thinking, well, we can actually allow, what if we let you customize certain sections of the report? So we've done a few things like you can change the presentation layout of the coverage now. So a kind of layout that's more applicable to somebody like James, if you wanted to view it online, would be list mode. And it's really what it says on the tin, really. So it's a bit more of a consumable quick table view. Now, these reports can be downloaded by CSV anyway to get to this kind of data, and it's certainly something there's going to be, I don't mind saying, I think a bit more innovation in this area with Coverage Book in the future. We're certainly looking to explore more ways that we can let people share data or reports in the way that they need to be able to share them. But for James, this kind of view was, what he was looking for, which was, there was just an assumption made that, it was full-size screenshots, and that's how he wanted to get reports. So, and obviously we've got things like the Vault, I think, which is probably more of a preferable area for somebody like James, where he could just come in and, do a search for a particular date range in the last month, pick out a load of coverage, and then build books and then export the data from that. So it's does that help, Sarah?
Yes, it does. It's worth saying as well that James then was using he goes in and out of the Coverage Vault all of the time. I did mention that there's still brand managers, still brand PR managers that are involved in some of those campaigns. And they still like the other view. So, Gary, would you mind just showing the sort of more visual view, which a lot of the sort of direct PR managers prefer?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of, I've just quickly made a book out of just some Instagram coverage there. So, cool.
Yeah.
Just again, we've just got these 3 basic layouts right now. I was certainly seeing a number of different customers that have shared in terms of how they're using it. They're breaking books up into different sections, and some sections they might have in like full display mode. They might, maybe some roundup coverage. They might just want in like list view, some key pieces they might want to display in full, and they're sort of organizing their coverage into sections in that way. So it's quite interesting seeing the different ways that people are sort of treating Coverage Book a bit more like a, where you can create little recipes of how you want books to look now, I guess. And once maybe you've got a recipe that suits a certain client, you can copy that book as a template. Or maybe in James, something like James's case, maybe you've built this whole book out, or say this was an Instagram report with hundreds of pieces in, and it was you want to send, that one recipient wants it all in full screen mode, but then somebody else might just want to see a quick view of the data. You could just copy the book and then change the layout. That's sort of a pretty typical possible workflow.
Andrew just mentioned in the chat that the CSV export to Coverage Book data allows you to combine it with other data sources such as Google Data Studio, or just using it on Google Sheets, Excel, etc. Lots of people do that too. And in fact, that was definitely something that we know that James was doing when he was first comparing it to other areas of marketing and impressions. And in fact, there's another example of that, thank you, later on, which I'm on to. Thanks, Gary. So some areas there that if you're not already thinking about and options for the different people. So James' new reports help him attribute business success to PR activity. That's the dream, right? That's what we want. And before that, he was really struggling to be able to say, we're getting more views on this area of marketing in comparison to others. It all led to making better budget decisions, which is really important. So a couple of examples there of like the primary audience, and then remember Jack at the beginning, who is sort of more of the forward on a wider audience, but still important. I want to now share with you, and I'll share this link afterwards, how you can do, this is a really useful worksheet that's provided to us by Storytelling data team. So I will also share the podcast. I'll drop it into the chat shortly. Did a podcast with these guys and Cole, who heads up storytelling with data, and they are absolute experts in this. We've learned lots from them, and we do lots of work. We've done lots of work with them in the past. So this worksheet is a really good springboard into creating your own for when you're getting to know different audience groups, especially your primary audience, which could be your main client or your main stakeholder who has requested a report, getting to know them better. But also when you then start to look at your secondary group as well, meeting them, or if you can't get to them, asking more questions from your primary client, your primary audience reports requester, if you like, asking about who they then send it on to. You can ask some of these questions to them as well. It's only going to make their jobs easier and make them look better. So they really won't mind you digging into this, because we did this kind of thing when we were a digital marketing agency and we were reporting into SEO teams, head of digital marketing, head of PR, and the board all at the same time with one set of results, and adapting for all of those different audiences. You have to get to know what motivates them and what's going to make them look better around the business, and then you can send them the results. Otherwise, it's very difficult otherwise. So yeah, Liz, as I say, I'll send you the link to this. But who's your audience? Really getting to know them. What do they care about? What do they need? If you could single it down to one single person, that's really, really, really useful if you can do that, because you get to know them better rather than just having a group. Because the more generic it is, you don't get really targeted and personalized, and you want it to be as personalized as possible. What's the benefits to them by receiving your PR reports and your PR results? What risks do they experience in their role if they don't receive your PR results or know what's going on in PR for their organisation? That's a really interesting one. It will really help you frame the information. It says form your big idea. The big idea is how you deliver the PR results. We put a lot of this effort in PR when we're coming up with the creative, but not so much when we're sending or storytelling the results of PR. It should have as much of the effort that we put into storytelling our creative as we should in storytelling our results as well.
Yeah. From having worked with all kinds of different teams, just still feels like the unique opportunity for comms teams, really. So the potential masters of storytelling should almost be super confident going into a room full of digital people or anything else. Because I've sat with those people, and in a lot of cases, they may be winging it with just maybe more access to data than you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that what they're saying is clear, articulate, and useful. So I think, I love some of these guys. Yeah.
But we really are the experts in stories, and we just need to apply it. So do sort of try and apply sort of that kind of exercise to these different groups, and then adapt your reports based on the groups, and don't have one big distribution list. If you have to have a distribution list, at least break it down by these different groups so you can start to personalize, adapt the format as Gary showed us, but then also start to personalize how you deliver the information. So for each audience, try and understand, how does PR, what is at stake, what are the important and current, how important are the current PR results to them right now? How are they receiving these results as well? So is it going to be on a sort of video call like this? Is it going to be on email? If it is on email, what's the device that they're using? Really do need to know this. It makes such a big difference, not just to the subject heading in an email, but through to the report type and the layout that you choose in Coverage Book. Some look incredible when you are on an iPhone scrolling through. Some not so good on an iPhone when it's full screen, and they look better on a desktop. Some look better when they're printed. It really does make a difference as to what people are doing with these results. That was put into a lot of the decision making with those layouts, wasn't it, Gary?
Yeah, sure. I mean, hopefully, the Coverage Book 2 will sort of help with some of those things anyway. If you choose to share online, then regardless of what device it's on, it's hopefully going to look pretty good. But certainly there's a lot of thought around some of the export options around things like PDFs and printing PDFs. And we offered sort of limited options in one, where it's kind of, you print out a PDF and it would be 9 pages of A4 paper for every piece of coverage, was kind of like the only option, which we're not doing at the moment. I didn't personally think that was of much value to a report reader. We're doing some research in that area now, but there's certainly a lot more work to be done, and it's kind of why I'm keen to speak to as many people about the different formats and their needs, and get people thinking about this, because there's a lot of innovation. I think there's a lot of space for us to learn and do more.
Do they share the results as well? It's not just about the report layout, but you really have to consider which metrics you're choosing as your highlight priority metrics at the top there as well. So that's really important question to know where it's being forwarded onto. So we've talked about like the format. So I said about emailing some reports. Now, here's some examples. Which one grabs your attention? It could be the same email, but written in this different subject heading. Is writing a different subject heading is so key with framing for the audience and grabbing the attention of your audience as well. As mentioned, especially with the secondary audience, it might be going to a business owner, the board, or the C-suite, if you like, people who are busy just glancing at something on their phone. Putting context into the subject heading. This is obviously, you can tell this is about profit, but you can see that I'm that's getting my attention. It says I'm ahead. This could equally be about your PR results as well. We are ahead of our PR target this week. Don't just say, here's the coverage this week, because if that's being forwarded on, it's not going to get opened, and it's all about the open rate that we want here. But again, if it's just been sent to somebody who's involved in PR day to day, if Hannah, who I work with closely on PR for our business, if she just sent me an email and said, here's the clips, we're talking every day. So that's very different. But if it's somebody outside your organization, it needs to be framed for them, and as much information you can know about them as possible, what you need. You going to say something, Carrie? No. Okay. So another example here. This was actually a real example, and this is my inbox just earlier today. So we've got the same information, but framed in a different way because it was a different audience. So the top two that I want to grab your attention for. So let's have a look. First one, we've got the 15 retweets of the video, one that needs attention. That's in the subject heading. Now, the reason for that subject heading is because the primary audience for that is the marketing and PR team. So it can be brief and say, yeah, we've got 15 retweets of the video. We know what the video is. We know that it's live. It's great that we've got 15 retweets, but I need to make an action. So it's going to grab my attention. But the same results to a different group needs different framing. We've got here that Gary has sent one to the business owners and the board and to the wider team, and he's added context. The framing is completely different, and he's prioritized data based on the information that he knows that audience needs. So his audience was the business owners and the board, and he said new customers are up 5%. He's added some context there by saying versus last year to make sure that we know that that's good or bad. And then also since the video launch, which is a video that we've launched for Coverage Book. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Anything you want to add there, Gary?
No, I mean, hopefully just that subject line is almost enough just to give context for a conversation, more so than check out new results. Or, again, it depends on, there's definitely a habitual thing with this sort of stuff. Just, it's practice, learn, habit with things like this, where it's just like, you just have a quick check on yourself and go, so what? That's why I was sort of smiling when you were saying about you and Hannah, because I'm just thinking, but you might have just said that, but actually if you wrote it in a slightly different way, one of you might have been more motivated to share it beyond the team, maybe.
Yes.
So I think there's something habitual there. Just looking at your lines, the first line you say it, and it is a bit of like the classic. So give me some context. I don't know, is this good or bad? I don't know. I'm not in your world every day. So just remind me, I've got so much other stuff going on. Give me a bit of context about what's going on.
Yeah, it's worth having a reminder of who we keep sort of going past this sort of primary audience. It's almost like having the clear groups titled somewhere and reminding yourselves, like Gary said, whether they're even in the PR world or not. If they're not, really think about the labeling, the metrics that you're using. Really, really important. So return to your audience research that you do by the groups, and then prioritize the data that you're putting into the subject heading at the top of the email, how you are creating your reports. But I just wanted to add this as well, just because we were talking about context. Even beyond Coverage Book and anything that you are creating within our tool, that beyond that, just with any kind of PR measurement, context is just so key. And this is something that we're looking at trying to highlight more within the tool. But we've got a nice graph here about how many pieces of coverage were achieved over the course of the year. You might think that that's good. So that's telling me some information. I'm having to look. But what about this difference? It's the same graph. I'll just let you have a look. Can you spot the difference? The difference is that there's been some context added. So let's just go back. 89 pieces of coverage across the year. Okay, there's a spike there. But let's highlight the spike, and it's got some context. So 89, the goal was, can't see what it says there. So it's got the goal was 90, and so 20. Oh, so it's not good. Oh no, it's crazy.
The goal was 20. Smashed it. Yeah.
Smashed the KPI. So yeah, it's got some context, and then it's got some commentary as well. So just something to bear in mind, even if you're going into more bigger evaluation at the end of the year. This is a simple thing, but bringing in the insight that you've got from your audience research is key. Also, graphs are great, but remember, dashboards are not made to be shared very widely. I know that someone mentioned Google Data Studio there, and we talked about downloading data into CSV for further analysis. That's great if somebody has requested it, but it's not good if you are just sending out to a group. We really need to simplify and make our results as clear to understand for our audience as possible. Otherwise, people will just shut down. And that is not just within spreadsheets, but also with dashboards as well. Having said that, I've got here, so please don't data puke, which is a term which I love and hate at the same time. But it's also worth knowing that if somebody does need to have a look at this, so some clients do request data studios, dashboards to be created, but please only do that if they have requested it. And some people are, and it's really important for the job that they're doing. So I just wanted to run through, this is quite an example I wasn't expecting to add actually, but somebody asked for a demo of Coverage Book just the other day. I can't say which agency they're from, I don't think, but yes, their role, it's a digital marketing agency, but their main job for all of their clients is data analysis of the results of marketing, and that could be marketing that is run across lots of different agencies. And so they were asking the agencies to send in all of their reports, and their job is to analyze all of the results and try and attribute success to the different areas of marketing. So the reason why they asked to look at Coverage Book, because I said Coverage Book doesn't do that. We're about showcasing PR results. We are not an attribution tool. Go somewhere else. They're like, no. I think we're really curious to have a look, because the reports we get from the PR team, we can't really use. It's just all screenshots and total traffic numbers of websites. I'm just not really sure how to use that. And we're trying to compare it with SEO. Now, luckily, I was on the demo and I started the demo and I started to show them. Normally when we do demos, we go straight to the nice flashy design of a report and the big screen grabs. And then when they said what their job was, no, I've worked with a team like you before. And we went I changed it. I went straight to the coverage vault, and I showed them domain authority on the list of all of the items of coverage, because I knew that they needed to think about SEO impact. And then I also talked about download to CSV, because I knew that that'd be good to get it into their data studio that they were doing. And then I also talked about the estimated views, because I knew that they might be looking at impressions for the other area. So real interesting one, because they were then going to talk to the PR team about using Coverage Book and different metrics. So it's just an interesting one there, that they have a very specific job, and you may well be working with people like this. Their job is to make recommendations based on all of the data they're analysing back to the head of marketing, who's the budget holder. So in a PR team, you might not even know that this is going on behind the scenes, but it's worth asking the question, is this kind of analysis going on? Can we meet them?
Do you remember in the olden days when we were like from an SEO agency, and we were trying to make friends with PR teams when we were trying to work out how to take link building from SEO teams into digital PR. And we weren't trusted by the PR teams, and maybe rightly so. And part of that building trust was to get shared language, see how they were reporting. We were kind of just stuck in this limbo of going, well, they don't understand our reports. And it's like, well, why would they? We've not really spoken to them about it. We've not tried to, explain ourselves properly. And then actually it turned out we could start sharing some of the things that we were doing more in a way that was, more common for a PR team. And so, that it's that sort of shared dialogue, I think, with some of this stuff. It's sort of getting your head around. Yeah, you can just reframe some of the things you're doing anyway. And then suddenly it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that's it. And it wasn't any extra work to do some of that reframing in most cases. It might have been marginally extra, but the gains from it were huge.
Yeah. And this is what we're trying to get across, and which is why we have the easy, quick switch in Coverage Book now, where you can quickly change your formats. But before you even get to that, you need to go back to the drawing board and say, who is our audience? Who's the primary audience? What do they want? Who's the secondary audience? Is there an SEO team? Is there a head of marketing that's being forwarded my results? Can I send them a separate email? Or even if your client won't let you do that, create a separate report, a separate email, and send it to your client. And then gradually they'll probably let you send it to them anyway. So make sure you're doing that research. As I say, I'll send you this worksheet because, as I say, you need to personalize as much as possible and make everything as actionable as possible as well, because you never know where sometimes your results can end up. So remember the first example that I talked through, which is my brother Jack. He was a producer and did make a catastrophe, and he was interested to know where he was in that fearful place of, is my show going to get recommissioned? But now, a couple of years later, he's now the commissioner at Channel 4, and he now really has a big interest in who's doing the PR and who's running the comms and how those reports are being sent, because it does make a difference to that organisation. It makes a difference to his decisions on what's being commissioned or not by gauging what the press is saying and how people are engaging with articles and social posts as well. So it really does make a difference, not beyond your direct client and where they might end up. And like we said with James as well, now he's getting the results in the formats that he wanted, and he's getting the metrics that he needed. His job is being made easier. He can now report to the board, and he's actually now investing more money in PR activity off the back of that. So it's totally worth our while, our while in developing the tool as well. So that does bring us to a close now. So if you've got any questions, we've got a few minutes to answer any questions on everything that we've shared today. Send them in. But I will also drop in some of the resources that we mentioned too.
I'm looking. The main thing I'll just reiterate again, we've been learning and having, conversations about report formats for years. So we're especially from Coverage Book's perspective, we're trying to keep things simple. So, we've got a bit of a view that we shouldn't give tons of flexibility and customization, because that leads to complexity, and the whole idea is that it's a simple and easy tool to use. We're hoping now with some basics that you'll be able to adapt some of the reports quickly and easily to suit different report readers. But certainly it's going to be a big part of next year is just continuing to look at different easy formats for you to use. So I would love to hear any stories that you have. If you're like already now thinking, I have no idea why Coverage Book doesn't do this kind of format, I'd love to hear it. So just happy to have those conversations away from this too. So but otherwise, hope that was useful. This is great timing. My children are coming home, so they're going to start screaming through the door any second.
Catherine asked about a good certificate program about PR data and analytics. I'm not sure if the Andrew who was chatting before.
It must have been Andrew Smasherman.
It must be.
Yeah. or it's a twin brother, I don't know, who also is very much into PR analytics. We can share a few suggestions maybe as part of the follow-up email. of places to go. Certainly AMEC have some good accreditation and certifications. We can speak to Steph Bridgman, who I think I saw in the chat. Hello, Steph.
Yes, it is Andrew.
So yeah, we can.
We'll mention those. But we're doing an email follow-up tomorrow with the recording and notes, and I will add Andrew and Steph's details in there because they do some amazing training and help with evaluation.
Yeah. Oh, there's a really good question. Do you think agencies tend to overcomplicate how they communicate PR results to their clients? Is a straightforward approach better? Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, I guess the point is it's sort of not about what I think, but I just wonder if anyone's stopped to ask. And especially, you know, from my agency, you know, we worked at fairly small agencies where we had like 20 clients. I can pretty much guarantee that each one of those clients, if I went with hindsight now, I'd have probably adapted our ways of reporting differently for each of those clients because they were very different. We used to have fairly vanilla, probably too much in them because we were trying to have one uniform report that suited all clients, which sort of made some sense from a process perspective, but actually was counterproductive in many ways. So yeah, I mean, reporting on an e-commerce client is very different to reporting to a lobbying, you know, some of the organizations we used to work with, or it's just so different.
But the difference is, I think the difference is with the agency that Gary's talking about, the digital marketing agency that we both worked at. It was because the objective of the business when it would come in would always be so different. We had to do that real in-depth research with what the objective was and how we were going to achieve it. So then the reports would all be very different. Whereas my experience of working in PR tends to be, let's just show the coverage and then some kind of impact. The trouble is that we have access to so much more data now that it can get quite overcomplicated. And actually, we just need to simplify right back. What are we trying to achieve? And just answer that. Everything else is almost like, I mean, really, the screen grabs, all of the coverage analysis should be like the information that they don't need to see. It just needs to be did we achieve this or not?
That's definitely a question with context. You know, we've had working with multiple agencies, so we've got all the interagency relationships. I've definitely seen good things where agencies have taken the lead to simplify reporting on behalf of their clients. If I was a client, I'd certainly appreciate somebody trying to simplify things for me. And I think if we had James here now talking, that was a key driver for him. It's overwhelming. Some of the jobs that you do in organizations can feel overwhelming. So even reports for yourself, keeping things simple can keep you sane. And maybe the data is less, it might not be as advanced as it potentially could be, but if it's actionable and usable, that seems to be more important in my view.
And having consistency as well. We do that even within the metrics that we all look at within the coverage book organisation, how well we are doing as a business. There are thousands of metrics that we could be looking at. It's crazy, and it definitely blows my mind, who's not naturally analytical. But Gary simplifies it for me, which is fantastic. Thank you. And we have 3 key metrics, and that's what we're tracking. And they're consistent, and we look at them over time. So for the 8 years that we've almost been going as an organisation, we consistently look at those metrics, and it really helps you just build a good picture, tell a good story of how well we're doing. And it means that it's actionable as well. It's actionable for me if we're looking at how we can build more awareness or not, you know. So that's the key thing with reporting, I think. And also that's what we're trying to do with the Vault, with coverage book. So, you know, like add in all of your coverage, and then you can then just choose, you know, over the course of the year, start to tell stories by looking back at the data, your coverage data.
But if you look back, you know, again, just looking back to older days, I think there's definitely a level of like maturity that's probably missing in a lot of these conversations, even between clients and agencies or key stakeholders. Because, you know, I certainly remember thinking, I'm going to report in this way to show us in our best light possible, because this client is possibly not going to renew our work. And that was important to us as an agency that we renewed. But actually, if you really, what would be an enlightened perspective is if something didn't work, you could genuinely have that showcase I would value that now. Anyone that ever works with us now, I appreciate somebody saying, we tried this, it didn't work. Here's the report showing it didn't work. Let's have a conversation about what we'll do next.
Yeah.
That is a million miles away from a lot of the conversations I used to have. It used to be like, oh, I've massaged the results a little bit. It looks better than really it was. And yeah, that, which is not really useful for anybody. But then, you know, the clients needed to play their part there to encourage you to say, that's fine. That's okay. It was okay to like for it not to perform that well. But the key point was, let's have a conversation about what went wrong and what we're going to do about it. And it's kind of that level of discussion that would be amazing to see more of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
these sorts of conversations help. These prompts that Stella's given you today will definitely help elevate the level of discussion that you have, I think.
And tell us what else you need as well. You know, did you like from using these different layouts more and the vault more? If you can see things within Coverage Book that are going to help these conversations, let us know. We really want to know. Cool. Okay. Thank you so much for all joining us and staying with us as well. A lot of you did stay on to hear us rambling on and answering your questions at the end. We really do appreciate it. Do look out for my follow-up email, which will be the recording, which you can forward on to anyone in your team that didn't manage to join live today. And I'll also add in those links that we mentioned too. All right. Thank you very much. For everyone in the UK, have a lovely extra holiday. And everyone in the US, I hope you enjoyed your day yesterday. And yeah, we will see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
See you guys.